My name is Cindy, a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband Joe through a colleague at work, sort of a blind date, and we ended up getting married. Joe and I are the same age and share similar hobbies, so I anticipated a joyful life together. Joe's parents were cheerful and kind. My mother-in-law once said, "We were worried because Joe hadn't brought home a single potential bride until now. Please take good care of Joe." Her words stung a bit, considering I'm his age too, but I chose to ignore it. A year has passed since our wedding. Though we sometimes argued, and Joe would often bring up divorce during those moments, I thought it was just part of married life. Despite this, we generally got along well. On weekends, we enjoyed driving and taking day trips, a hobby we had shared even before getting married. While I used to travel alone frequently, we now did everything as a couple. Joe lived with his parents until we got married, using their car when he went out. Since then, we've been using my car, which is nearing its end. I originally drove a compact car because I liked the design and rarely had passengers, but I was now considering buying a new one before the next inspection. When I discussed this with Joe, he agreed, saying, "It's your car, so do as you like. But if you're going to replace it, why not get a larger car instead of a compact?" I agreed with his suggestion. The following weekend, we went to look at cars together. As we began looking at cars, Joe grew increasingly excited. He pointed out an expensive model, praising its performance, spacious interior, and overall quality. Despite its appeal, I hesitated due to the high costs, which I hadn't planned for. Joe suggested, "How about I take out a loan in my name? We both drive about the same amount, and the payments would come from our household budget." Although it didn't matter who took the loan, his suggestion seemed practical, and we decided to explore that option. We looked at other cars, but we liked the first one best and decided on it. However, the loan application in Joe's name was denied, likely because he had just changed jobs. Joe became angry and snapped at the clerk, "I'm saying I'll buy it. Can't you do something about it?" This is one of the things I dislike about Joe. He often has a condescending attitude towards staff, no matter the store. When I tried to calm him down, he got upset and went outside to smoke. Joe can be domineering and quick to threaten divorce when things don't go his way, which is exhausting. I apologized profusely to the salesperson. Maybe it would be easier to get a loan for a smaller amount. If the car is cheaper, I could pay in full, I suggested while consulting with the salesperson. Just then, Joe returned. "Hey, why not buy it under Cindy's name? I'll be the one paying anyway," he said, leaving me to ponder the situation. Actually, I found Joe's suggestion appealing. None of the other cars resonated with me the same way. I nodded and signed the documents. They said it would take a few months for the car to be delivered. In the meantime, I drove around in my old car, cherishing our last moments together. One day, as my husband sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with his smartphone, he remarked, "Finally bidding farewell to this cramped space, huh?" During the drive, I let him take the wheel and casually glanced at his phone left on the dashboard. A message caught my eye. "Did you get a new car? And it's a luxury car at that." It was from one of Joe's colleagues. Joe seemed to be showing off our new car. Given his vanity, he likely hadn't mentioned that the car was purchased under my name. Though I thought it mattered, this car ultimately changed our fate. 3 months later, the first place we went in our newly delivered car was to my in-laws' house. We visited to celebrate my father-in-law's retirement, a visit my husband always emphasized as important to honor his parents. When my father-in-law greeted us, he excitedly examined the car and exclaimed, "So this is the new car. It's so cool." I suggested, "Let's go out together in it next time," to which he responded with delight. My mother-in-law also chimed in, "I want to go too. How about a spa trip?" She seemed excited, so I started making plans, taking their wishes into account. At my in-laws, we had a wonderful time reminiscing about my father-in-law's work and my husband's childhood. One memorable comment from my mother-in-law was, "I really wanted a daughter. I thought it would be fun to go out and share clothes with her, but instead, I gave birth to Big Joe." She then added, "So Cindy, if you don't mind, let's go out together next time." I was thrilled. However, my husband didn't seem to find this amusing. Although my mother-in-law was only joking and hadn't implied he was unwanted, he sulked. Before we got married, I found his pouting cute, but it has become a bit annoying with how frequently it happens. Perhaps because his parents were present, my husband refrained from saying anything, but he often used the threat of divorce to manipulate me into compliance. Despite the tension, we managed to navigate the situation and returned home. The following day, after returning from work, my husband entered the living room and announced, "The luxury car you bought will be a gift for my dad. If you disagree, we might as well divorce, right?" Initially, I thought he was joking and tried to brush it off, but it became evident he was dead serious. "Wait, why are you bringing this up now?" I asked, puzzled. Dad was eyeing that car with envy. The best way to honor my parents' retirement is by gifting him that car and letting him enjoy it, he insisted firmly. I was taken aback by his sudden demand, but Joe remained adamant and refused to compromise. He's always been stubborn, and there are moments when he becomes irate if I don't go along with his wishes. Annoyed, I attempted to reason with him, saying, "We agreed to spend time with your father together, didn't we? Giving the car as a gift is..." But he wasn't open to discussion. The argument escalated, and Joe began to lose his temper. As their only son, I feel it's my duty to give something back to Mom and Dad. I want them to appreciate having a son, not a daughter. Joe seemed still affected by his mother's comment about wishing for a daughter. Perhaps he felt competitive after his mother expressed interest in going out with me. I was stunned. We couldn't possibly afford to give such an expensive gift. Why don't we plan a trip to a hot spring resort instead? We talked about this yesterday, didn't we? But Joe remained dissatisfied, glaring at me. "I married you, a woman past her prime, didn't I? You have nothing to boast about. Do you even realize who is responsible for the life we're leading? Just once, listen to what I have to say." His harsh words chilled my feelings for Joe instantly. Past her prime, huh? I was aware of it, but hearing someone else say it was infuriating. After all, I managed the household chores, which put me in a better position than Joe, who couldn't do much around the house. Besides, I was also contributing financially, and our livelihood didn't depend solely on Joe's salary. With these thoughts, the aspects of Joe that grated on me began to surface. His treatment of waitstaff, his tendency to sulk, his stubbornness. I had tried to overlook these traits, but now they were starting to wear on me. As these thoughts churned in my mind, Joe left the room and returned with something in his hand. "Ha!" I exclaimed when he handed me divorce papers. As I looked up in surprise, he said, "Just sign the car ownership transfer document. If you're not okay with it, you can fill out the divorce papers and leave. It's up to you." To my disbelief, the divorce papers were already filled out. "That's enough," I muttered, feeling fed up. "Fine." As I signed the document, Joe nodded with satisfaction, casually discarding the divorce papers and retreating to his room. The next day, Joe handed me the necessary documents for the car's title transfer, asking, "Can we transfer the title even though we just took out a loan?" I took the documents, pondering his question. To be certain, I decided to consult the dealership where we purchased the car. It turned out that transferring the title while a loan was still active posed significant challenges. Additionally, since the ownership change required my father-in-law's approval, it couldn't be the surprise gift Joe envisioned. Besides, my father-in-law had never expressed a desire for a car. I thought if I explained this to Joe, he might abandon the idea. I also explored the option of selling the car. Now that it felt tainted by our recent conflict, I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep driving it. The model was popular, and production couldn't keep up with demand, so selling it could fetch a high price. With that money, I could pay off the loan and choose a new car that I truly liked. When I arrived home from work and explained to Joe the complications of changing the car's title due to the loan, he responded sharply, "Then we'll just have to buy another car. Dad will be thrilled for sure." "I'm sorry, but Dad never expressed a desire for a car," I countered. "Well, then it looks like we're really going to get divorced," Joe muttered before storming off to his room. I reached my breaking point. I had been willing to work through things if he apologized, but I couldn't continue the marriage under these circumstances. I made the decision to pack my belongings. Simultaneously, I arranged to sell the car. The dealership offering the highest price agreed to collect it at a later date. A sense of relief washed over me. I planned to move out while Joe was at work the following week, putting an end to everything. With this resolve in mind, I finished my shift on Friday and returned home, only to find the car missing from its usual spot in the parking lot. "What?" I hurried inside to check if the car keys were still where I left them. "They're gone." Panic set in as I dialed Joe's number repeatedly. Despite my efforts, he didn't answer, nor did he read my messages asking him to contact me. Did Joe take the car somewhere? But that car is already. 3 hours later, I finally received a message from him. He explained he was on a trip with a colleague and suggested we both needed time to cool down. What? I exclaimed involuntarily, my voice rising as I stared at my phone screen in frustration. If Joe was on a trip, it meant he wouldn't be back tonight. I wasted no time and swiftly set my plans into motion, plans I had carefully laid out over the past few days. I called a real estate agent I knew from work and finalized the lease on the apartment he had reserved for me. I also arranged for a moving company to relocate all my belongings, furniture, appliances, everything. By the next morning, the movers had efficiently packed and transported everything to my new place. By mid-afternoon, I had settled into my new life. With the weight lifted off my shoulders, I found myself dozing off. Suddenly, my phone rang, startling me awake. It was Joe calling. He must have returned home, discovered my absence, and was likely taken aback enough to call. I couldn't help but smirk a little as I answered the phone. "Cindy, can you help me?" Joe's voice came through the phone, frantic and alarmed. It was clear he wasn't at home. "I had an accident, and my insurance isn't covering it." Confused, I replied, "What?" Joe's frustration grew evident. "That's why the new car's insurance. I called them after the accident, but they're saying it's not covered." As I pieced together his words, realization dawned. "What do you mean you had an accident? Where are you? Are you hurt?" I asked, attempting to sound concerned despite my mixed emotions. It wasn't my fault. The other party wasn't paying attention. But more importantly, what about the insurance? Joe sighed heavily. "I thought I made myself clear, didn't I? I told you not to use the car for now, Joe. You said you understood it, right? So why did you take it out without asking? We agreed to let each other know when using the car separately. Does none of that matter now?" Cindy took over, calling the insurance company from my end. Hearing the word accident made me nervous, but if he had the energy to shout, it probably wasn't too serious. I calmly laid out the situation. The car was reported stolen. When I got home, it was gone, so I reported it to the police. In fact, it was scheduled to be sold today, and now you're telling me there's been an accident. What am I supposed to do? I canceled the insurance because the sale was finalized. I canceled it when I told you not to touch the car. Upon hearing this, my husband, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-husband, began to panic. "Whoa, wait a minute. Even if I was driving our car, it shouldn't be reported stolen, Cindy. Please withdraw the theft report first. I understand about the insurance. We can discuss the financials when I get back home." But I couldn't simply accept his words. "By the way, I almost forgot to mention, you and I are now strangers. I filed for divorce 3 days ago, and it's been approved. Also, I'm not living in that house anymore." He shouted these words over the phone, but I hung up anyway. After hanging up, his calls continued relentlessly, so I eventually turned off my phone to get some peace. The next day, I took a day off from work to organize my room. When I switched my phone back on in the morning, it was flooded with missed calls from my ex-husband. There was even a call around 1 a.m., likely when he returned home. But he was the one who hastily filed for divorce, and he was the one who used divorce as a threat. If he believed that mentioning divorce would make me comply with his demands, he was mistaken. Initially, when we first married, I might have given in to avoid the embarrassment of divorce so soon after tying the knot at 35. Perhaps that's why he assumed I would comply again. However, as I sorted through my room and reflected on everything, all those pent-up frustrations finally pushed me past my hesitations. My phone rang again. Assuming it was my ex-husband, I checked, only to see it was a call from my mother-in-law. "I received a call from Joe yesterday. He mentioned something about an accident and you leaving, but I couldn't make sense of it." "What's going on?" she asked, concerned. I took a deep breath and explained everything to her. "I apologize to you and father-in-law, but the divorce is final. Regarding the money for the car and dividing our belongings, I'm planning to arrange a meeting to discuss it soon." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law apologized profusely and said, "If it's all right with you, could I attend that meeting?" I'm worried Joe might say something unreasonable. I agreed to hold the post-divorce meeting at my in-laws' house. When I visited my in-laws after a long while, I found my father-in-law scolding my ex-husband. My mother-in-law noticed my arrival and invited me into the living room. As expected, my ex-husband was sulking, but a stern word from his father made him reluctantly lower his head. She mentioned that because you only do what you want, her life is in shambles. My father-in-law chastised him. That's when I revealed that I had sought legal advice regarding his constant threats of divorce, which could be deemed emotional abuse. My ex-husband's face drained of color upon hearing this. After some negotiation, we reached an agreement. He would cover the initial costs of the new car and the expenses related to retracting the theft report, with my father-in-law making up the difference. As I was leaving, my mother-in-law expressed regret, saying, "It's a shame we couldn't spend more time together, Cindy." I replied, "If it's all right with you, let's do it again sometime," and took my leave. It turned out that the colleagues my husband had shown off the car to on that fateful day were also present during the accident. They learned everything. The car was registered in my name, we were divorced, and the car had been reported stolen. Gossip spread through his workplace, and he became the subject of ridicule behind his back. Around this time, there was talk of a transfer, which he eagerly accepted due to discomfort in his current role. However, it turned out to be more of a demotion, sending him to a rural area. Expecting convenience stores and laundromats for daily needs, he found nothing nearby. The nearest supermarket was a 30-minute drive away, and there were no laundromats in sight. Recently, Catherine, who had invited me for a meal, expressed hesitancy about asking him how he was managing household chores. She was pleasantly surprised when I agreed to meet her, and now we've developed a close friendship. I'm content now. I've purchased a new car within my budget and enjoy solo trips, just like I did before.